Shana Tova. What a nice big sound it is to be together, to hear everybody singing together back in our sanctuary. For those of you who are outside, I was outside sort of corralling people to sing out there also. They were just looking like this. And I said, come on, you can sing too, just because you're outside. The neighbors want to hear you. Anyway, it's really, really nice to be back together again for this Rosh Hashanah and to be able to usher in the new year together. So I'm so glad everybody's here. And as I said last night, as you look around, surely there will be people who you don't see this year. And I encourage you to reach out and give them a call, say Shana Tova, see how they're doing, and encourage them to come back, if not sometime in 5783, but for Rosh Hashanah next year. This congregation has officially been serving the Jewish community of San Francisco and the Bay Area for over 100 years. For most, that is more than a lifetime. It is generations, thousands of simchas and life cycle moments. And my instinct in thinking about the magnitude of 100 years would be to say, that's nothing short of a miracle. Usually when I stand under the chuppah at a wedding, I call that a miracle. Two people unlikely to meet, creating a new family and bringing two families together, that's a miracle. But a community sustaining itself in the way that we have, I don't believe that's a miracle. That's hard work, commitment, and that, like a loving relationship, it's a choice. One story that I often find myself referring to, and I always have to apologize to my parents on the high holidays because I talk about my childhood, it might be embarrassing. The move that my family made when I was 15. After growing up in the city of Philadelphia, my parents told me during my first year of high school that we would be moving to the suburbs. The suburbs? I could tell you the whole story, how we looked at a few houses and I stood in every house with my teenage arms folded, unwilling to look around. How my parents chose a house that was in walking distance to the train, but how I never walked to the train because I didn't think there were consistent enough sidewalks. Or how on moving day, my 15-year-old self sat on the new suburban porch and I didn't lift one box. I could tell you how I despised the hum of the suburban crickets and missed the sirens coming from the hospital that was behind our city home. Or I could tell you how I moped around about it for 3 years. Or I could tell you that I'm clearly not still bitter about it. In retrospect, it was quite a privilege. I have a loving family. We had a beautiful home. I had my own room in our new suburban home. Our home had a pool. It wasn't a bad life. But I do think about this a lot when people ask where I grew up or where I went to high school or where my parents live now. Somehow it always creeps in. Well, I grew up in the city, but then my parents moved me to the suburbs. It influenced me, and it influenced my future choices, like being in San Francisco, because I'm a city kid. When I reflect on that time of my life and why this felt so unbelievably terrible, I realize it was because I felt my opinion was not considered. My sense of independence was taken away. My voice and what I wanted and I thought I needed was overridden by my parents who said it was best for the family. And you know, they were right. In retrospect, 15-year-olds don't get to choose where they live. But in a developmentally difficult time of growth and discovering who I was unable to make sense of it all, and I was unable to see the good. Thankfully, in a time when I had felt that so much was taken away from me, there was one thing that I got to keep, and that was my Jewish community. It didn't make any sense. It was a 45-minute drive from our new home. In fact, my brother prepared for his bar mitzvah at a different synagogue. And so my parents would join him sometimes, and they would join me for other holidays. But every Shabbat, I drove our family minivan into the city to be with my community at the synagogue where I had grown up. I'm honestly surprised I'm not some sort of testimonial at this shul. But I was extremely connected there. I had mentors and friends, and my parents knew that that was the compromise. And so when I felt like the world was crumbling around me, when I was unable to hear the reasons for why this was the best next step for my family, when I felt my independence and my choice had been taken away, I chose to hold on to the one thing that felt to me was irreplaceable, the one thing that I felt like I had control over, and believe it or not, it was my synagogue. Choice is so emotional. The minute each of us as babies began to walk and talk, we were given agency. And choice, the desire to choose between red and blue, later to go to sleep early or to stay up late, and even later to walk or to drive, it is built into the fabric of who we are. Think about the beginning of the Jewish narrative. God says to Avram, Lech lecha, go forward from your native land, and if you go to the land that I will show you, ve'esecha lagoy gadol ve'avarechecha, I will make you a great nation. Ve'a gadla shemecha, I will make your name great. Ve'hiye bracha, and I will bless you. In this birth moment of our nation, Avram is given a big choice, one that I'm not sure he even fully grasps its enormity. If you go forward, God says, if you leave this land behind for the unknown, then I, God, will bless you and all the generations that follow you. In other words, those of us who were born Jewish were born so because of Avram's choice. In Judaism, we are taught that it is lineage that matters. And that began with our first patriarch, Avram. Daniel Hartman, modern Orthodox rabbi, scholar, and president of the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, calls this the Judaism of being and becoming. Being because we and Avram and future generations are part of the Jewish family simply by our lineage, and becoming because Avram has to build trust in God and leave the land before God agrees to enter into the covenant first. First is relationship, and then commitment. Even Avram's path forward was not a given. We know about this idea of becoming from the scientific world as well, that the essential nature of concrete material objects are always changing. It is said that no person ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and it's not the same person. So what does that mean for us? What does it mean to honor our ancestors' choices while moving with a world that changes as quickly as a river runs? We say about a person who chooses Judaism that they are taking on a new identity, even a new name. That like the rushing river can be transformative, the mikveh waters are supposed to return you to birth, and in many cases, leaving another faith behind. Those who we lovingly call Jews by choice, they are part of our birth story as well, because it is taught and accepted that you stood at Sinai and received the Torah, just like all of the generations that came before you. Some rabbis call conversion affirmation, to affirm that the conversion is the life that you already knew to be true. Or adoption, because conversion isn't really a choice in a moment, but a lifelong process of being adopted or accepted into our faith. Call conversion what you want. What strikes me about right now, this first day of the year 5783, after 3 years of living in a pandemic, After reading countless articles and Pew studies over the last 10 years about how fewer and fewer people are joining synagogues, after being reminded of perceived horrors of intermarriage, which, by the way, I proudly come from, and how it will crush the future of our Judaism, I find myself asking, aren't we all Jews by choice? In the book of Ruth, we learn about one of our tradition's most famous and compelling conversion stories. Maybe the conversion story, where Naomi, Elimelech, and their 2 sons leave Bethlehem during a famine. There, both sons marry Moabite women, but within 10 years of marriage, the sons and their father die, leaving Naomi alone. When Naomi decides to return to the land of Israel, her 2 daughters-in-law try to go with her. Naomi begs them, Shovna, Isha levet ima, turn back to your mother's house. But Ruth replies, do not push me to leave you. Do not urge me to turn back and not to follow you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. The rabbis teach us that this is a story about conversion. Some would say it's the story about conversion, genuine and of her own free will. But of course, if you read the text and what we know about conversion today, there is no mikvah immersion and no Beit Din or formal invitation to join the Jewish people. Ruth chose to stay. She chose peoplehood first, and then she chose God and the Jewish tradition. In other words, it was through relationship that Ruth chose Judaism, not through religion or God. She went all in, from connecting with peoplehood and then to community, to God, and eventually through her future burial. Jews connect through our rituals and through our traditions, through those holy moments that bring us together as a community. Just a few weeks ago, Adam Lowy and I hosted the first B'nai Mitzvah orientation at Beth Shalom that I've hosted since before the pandemic and that Adam has hosted since joining our team. And what I tried to convey at that meeting to that specific group of upcoming B'nai Mitzvah families, the first cohort that we've seen in quite some time, is that our tradition has been the same for thousands of years. Even since the development of the bar and later bat mitzvah, most traditions have remained the same: an aliyah, a devar Torah. And it is important to remember that while the Torah that we read will stay the same, every student in this process is unique and is coming from a different background. Interfaith families, multicultural families, one parent, 4 parents, blended families, East Coast, West Coast, Ashkenazi, Sephardi. It's not a miracle that your families are here. It is not something that was forced upon you. It is a choice. We all have the ability to choose our Judaism, how we practice, and which rituals we want to take hold of. And I understand there are 2 opinions. Those of you who might say, but Rabbi Russell, I come from generations of Jews. Every generation before me has set the Seder table and made challah on Shabbat. Boys were circumcised at Brit Milah, and I wrapped tefillin with my grandfather. Rabbi, we had family who perished in the Shoah. How could you tell me that I am a Jew by choice? In fact, Jewish theologian Michael Wissegrad writes, being born into a particular family is hardly an achievement for which anyone deserves credit or blame. There is truth in the fact that being Jewish is biological, not ideological, and that it was Avram and God who made the choice and not us. And there is also truth that we can choose to do what we want with our Judaism. I believe that Judaism is beginning a new chapter in 5783. Not just at Beth Shalom, but in the world. Hayom Harat Olam. Just moments ago, we heard the blast of the shofar for the first time on this Rosh Hashanah, and our bodies and our souls were awakened to the sounds, and what that sound evokes is different for each of us. Year after year, Rosh Hashanah appears in our calendar, and year after year, we return the world, metaphorically, to how it was at birth. In the past few years, things that we took for granted, that we counted on as part of our ritual and spiritual lives, were changed. Many of them were even taken away from us. We moved dirt with our hands to place it on top of the caskets of our loved ones. We davened alone in our homes with videos of what we longed services would be. We also came together so many times, and even and especially when it was difficult, to recognize that even when the world looks grim, we have our tradition and we have each other. In the book of Breshit, God sets us out on a journey, not by force or by strength, and Avram had faith in the journey and on our behalf. In that moment of Lech Lecha, he chose the tradition that we hold on to this day and for the next year of 5783. He made that choice, and so should we. This year, I urge us all to think about what it means to be a Jew by choice, to choose your personal connection to Judaism. Some of you can genuinely say you have put in your time, and some of you are just getting started. But whether you have been a part of this community for 1 month or 50 years, how can you deepen your connection? What is something that you want to learn where you might stretch your practice and take a risk? How do you want to grow? In a time when I felt my choice had been taken away, I drove our family minivan every Shabbat to my synagogue in order to choose my Judaism. Whether you are a Jew by birth or a Jew by choice or a special and integral part of a Jewish family, I ask you, what does 5783 have in store for this community? And what does 5783 have in store for you? Shana Tova umetuka, wishing each of us a sweet, happy, and transformative new year.